example of the Pursuer, a very common horror video game archetype. Pursuers do not necessarily literally chase you through the hallways, though they do that sometimes too. Instead, they are reoccurring antagonists who pursue the player across multiple chapters of the story, or even throughout the entire game. They often appear unstoppable, unkillable, and invulnerable. They shrug off fire and bullets and explosions and whatever else we can throw at them. And in the end, the only choice the player has left is to run and hide. The Resident Evil franchise contains several examples of the Pursuer, like Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 and Nemesis in Resident Evil 3. Jack Baker in Resident Evil 7 is one of my favorites, and you can find examples outside of the horror genre too, like the SA-X in Metroid Fusion or the Emmy in Metroid Dread. All of these antagonists share a similar role. Their purpose is to make the player feel powerless and weak and vulnerable for most of the game. They usually have little to no personality. They are intelligent, but rarely if ever speak, Jack Baker being the notable exception to that rule. They cannot be bargained with. They are more like avatars of death and fear than actual characters. In most of these examples, eventually, usually in an epic final bloody showdown at the end of the game, the player ultimately manages to defeat these seemingly unstoppable pursuers. After overcoming many obstacles and surmounting many challenges, the player is finally allowed to feel powerful. But Pyramid Head is different. You never actually get to defeat this guy, not really, not physically. Defeating Pyramid Head is not a matter of outwitting him or getting stronger than him. Instead, what James Sunderland, the protagonist of Silent Hill 2, does is outgrow Pyramid Head, or at least outgrow his own personal need for Pyramid Head. When he no longer has any useful role in James's story, Pyramid Head destroys himself, which is really unusual for this type of character. Pursuers never kill themselves. They almost never choose to give up. And Pyramid Head is different in other ways too. All of those other examples, they objectively exist in reality. Other characters in the story can see them and interact with them. They have independent goals and motivations, something they are trying to accomplish. They have backstories and origins, something that explains where they came from and why they're doing what they're doing. But not Pyramid Head, not really. He only exists in James' story. No one else can see him or interact with him, with the single notable exception of Maria, but we'll discuss her more later. Pyramid Head does not have any true goals or motivations. He is a manifestation of James' emotions, and when James' emotions change, Pyramid Head vanishes. But also, Pyramid Head does physically exist. He is real. He is not an illusion or hallucination. This is an important distinction. The other world in Silent Hill is a real place, but it is also a place that changes for each person, that transforms depending on their psychology. There is evidence that, for some people, the other world is actually a very pleasant place to be. It only appears as a nightmare to James because he has a psyche warped by guilt and shame and loss and lust. Pyramid Head exists in James' version of the otherworld, but nowhere else, or at least he's not supposed to exist anywhere else. Due to his popularity with fans, he has made appearances in other Silent Hill media, like Homecoming and both of the movies. But to be honest, I don't care. His role in Silent Hill 2 is far more meaningful and impactful than anywhere else, and that is what we are going to focus on here. So what I want to do in this video is examine each of his appearances in Silent Hill 2, from his horrific introduction to his surprising self-destruction, and discuss how his role in the story develops over time, and I will discuss the differences between the remake and the original as well. In both versions of the game, Pyramid Head is introduced in the same way, on the second floor of the Woodside Apartments. While exploring a dark hallway, your radio will begin going haywire, playing harsh, distorted static, a mechanic that indicates when a dangerous monster is nearby. You will see an ominous red glow, a set of iron bars, and on the other side of those bars, a menacing creature awaits. It looks like a man wearing a stained butcher's smock and a bizarre rusted triangular iron helmet that covers his entire head and much of his torso. His appearance is designed to be inhuman, alien, and unsettling. That weird triangular helmet is famous now. It has become one of the most recognizable symbols of the Silent Hill franchise. But back when the game first released, no one had ever seen anything like this before. Most people did not know what they were looking at, and that is on purpose. His visual design is meant to be abnormal and bizarre. The man, if he is a man, does not speak, does not even move. He waits and he watches in total silence. For now, with the iron bars standing between you and this creature, you are safe, but that won't last for long. After exploring a nearby room, you re-enter the hallway to discover that he is gone. I love this introduction because it is so quiet and so subtle. You do not know who this guy is or what he wants, but you already do know just through the sound design and the visuals that he is dangerous. And you know that you are going to meet him again, and next time you won't be protected by a conveniently placed set of iron bars. Now let's move on to Pyramid Head's second appearance, and this one is by far his most controversial and most confusing. James wanders into a random room in the apartment building and witnesses Pyramid Head assaulting and then killing two mannequin-type monsters. James hides in a nearby closet, and when Pyramid Head investigates, James fires a gun at him. Pyramid Head does not react to the bullets and apparently just chooses to leave the protagonist alone. He moves in this sort of glitchy way, in starts and stops and stutters, and he makes these strange poses, all of which is meant to make him seem more inhuman and alien. This plays out slightly differently in the PlayStation 2 version. In that game, he reacts really dramatically to the bullets and flees. I like the new version more because it demonstrates Pyramid Head's invulnerability. He cannot get hurt. He will continue to exist for exactly as long as James' guilt and subconscious need for punishment continue. Bullets cannot damage your own sense of guilt. But let's rewind back to the beginning of the scene. What the hell is happening here and why? This is the only time in the entire game where two monsters, two different manifestations of James' psyche, are shown attacking each other. The animations here are definitely meant to imply sexual assault, though it is worth noting neither Pyramid Head nor the mannequins have genitals. They are not biologically capable of engaging in any form of sexual intercourse. Furthermore, there is no reason to believe that Pyramid Head is even capable of feeling lust, pleasure, or sexual gratification, or anything else. So why is he doing this? Well, as I have already discussed, Pyramid Head is a manifestation of James' psyche, and James' psyche is full of unresolved lust and aggression. He had a wife who he loved very much but who was sick for many years, and who he was unable to be with physically for a long time. During her illness, he probably lusted after other women, and there was shame and guilt and anger and resentment twisted into all that. So he has these complicated feelings about sex and shame that he has not dealt with and which are screwing him up inside. In the other world of Silent Hill, those twisted feelings manifest as blatantly sexualized monsters and a version of his wife who is far more voluptuous and more flirty than his actual wife, and with Pyramid Head simulating sexual assault against these other monsters. There is something else being accomplished in this scene too. This scene has an important function in building up Pyramid Head as an antagonist. By presenting him as overpowering the other monsters, the developers are showing the audience that he is stronger than them, that this guy is the apex predator in this horror ecosystem. This is the one we need to be really afraid of, and that is made even clearer in his next appearance. In this third scene, James is trapped in a small, confined space with Pyramid Head, with no escape, nowhere to run or hide. Bullets have no effect on this monster, so the only thing you can do is survive for as long as possible. Eventually, a siren plays in the distance, and Pyramid Head just sort of wanders off. as if something out in the void is calling him away. So why does Pyramid Head do this? Why does he leave in the middle of battle? The reason is because Pyramid Head is not here to kill James. That is not his purpose. He is not an executioner, at least he is not our player character's executioner. His true purpose is to inflict fear and pain and suffering as a punishment for what James did to his wife, because that is what James subconsciously desires. So he chases the player around just long enough to accomplish that and then leaves before things go too far. This scene's counterpart in the original game differs from the remake in two key ways. First, in the original, you are trapped with Pyramid Head in this empty and very claustrophobic stairwell, with barely any room to maneuver around him. I think the main reason for the change in locations is that this little stairwell is not a conducive environment for the remake's new combat system, which is far more mobile and dynamic than the combat in the original. Second, in the original, the encounter with Pyramid Head takes place in the regular apartment building, whereas in the remake it takes place in the Nightmare version. Basically, the entire game of Silent Hill 2 does take place in the other world, but that other world has at least two distinct manifestations, if not more. One is the gloomy, creepy, surreal town covered in fog, and the other is this rusted, fleshy nightmare world, and they each serve as manifestations of different emotions. The fog world always felt sort of like depression to me, while the nightmare world is more like anger and self-hatred, but that's just my personal interpretation. Anyway, by moving the big confrontation from the fog world to the nightmare world, the developers of the remake are linking Pyramid Head more closely with the nightmare, with James' feelings of terror, anger, and hatred. And again, I think that's a good change. I like almost all of the changes the remake has made to the story. Moving on to the next level, Brookhaven Hospital, Pyramid Head has two more appearances. The first is up on the roof. After exploring a room, James turns around to suddenly find Pyramid Head standing directly in front of him, who then seizes James by the neck and throws him down through the floor. However, Pyramid Head does not actually do any damage to the player character, and in fact, this is really helpful. We are thrown down to an area we needed to reach in order to progress, but which we could not access otherwise. I think this short sequence reveals Pyramid Head's true purpose in the story. He is terrifying, he is aggressive, he is violent, but ultimately he is also helpful. Through his violence and terror, he is actually helping James move forward, even if that aid is difficult to perceive at first. Now, I do not think Pyramid Head is some benevolent guiding angel who just has James' best interests at heart. It is just a manifestation of James' emotions of guilt and aggression and a desire for punishment. However, by being so directly confronted by those emotions, it does end up having an unintended therapeutic effect. However, his next appearance is far less therapeutic. After getting trapped in the nightmare world and reuniting with Maria, she and James move down to the hospital's basement into a series of long, straight, narrow corridors. And all of a sudden, Pyramid Head emerges from behind and begins chasing them. This is by far his most terrifying appearance. It is a high stress, high anxiety, high adrenaline chase sequence where James only barely manages to escape, but not Maria. She is trapped on the other side of these closing elevator doors and stabbed through the heart, killing her instantly. I am going to post a whole video on Maria later where we will do a deep dive into her character, but for now, just for the sake of understanding Pyramid Head's role in the story, it is important to note that Maria represents, in some ways, a second chance for James. He is able to protect Maria from monsters in a way he was never able to protect his wife from her illness, until now. In this scene, once again, he is made to feel powerless, worthless, weak, and unable to save the life of someone he cares about. Something fascinating about this scene is that Pyramid Head easily could have killed or hurt James too, but he stops short. He only attacks Maria. Why is this? Well, the answer is simple. Pyramid Head is here to punish James. And one really effective form of punishment is to make him feel worthless and frustrated and impotent, is to force him to relive the bitter emotions of those long years of suffering when he could do nothing to help his dying wife. Of course, the person who gets the short end of the stick here is Maria, who has to die horrifically multiple times to catalyze James' emotional transformation. But again, we will discuss the tragedy surrounding her circumstances in another video. Both of these hospital appearances play out basically the same way in the original game, so there is nothing left to discuss here. After the death of Maria, James has a sort of emotional collapse. Reality begins to break down around him. The way locations in the town of Silent Hill connect together no longer makes any sense. He reaches the prison by jumping down a black hole at the bottom of the Historical Society, and there his feelings of guilt and punishment are brought to the forefront. But let's rewind a little bit. Somewhat surprisingly, Pyramid Head does not show up at all in the prison, but he does have a very small appearance in the Historical Society. This is a town museum which contains several paintings depicting important events in the town's history, including this one which is titled Misty Days, Remains of Judgment. And there he is, Pyramid Head, holding a bloody spear and surrounded by bodies hanging in iron cages. Okay, so all of the other paintings in the Historical Society depict real events in the town's history, so it is my belief that this one does too. This really happened. In the lore of the series, the town of Silent Hill has been a site of great spiritual power for a very long time. For that reason, it has also been the site of many strange and unexplained and tragic and grotesque events. It attracts cultists and lunatics. So at some point in the past, executioners in the town really did wear these bizarre, triangular iron helmets while performing their executions. This painting reveals two potential origins for the Pyramid Head manifestation in James' version of the Otherworld. The first possibility is that James saw this painting when he visited the town with his wife all those years ago, and it has floated around in his subconscious ever since as a grotesque symbol of punishment, which then manifested in the Otherworld when he arrived at the start of the game. The second and much more interesting possibility is that James never saw this painting, that he knows nothing about the town's horrific history. Instead, when manifesting these creatures in the Otherworld, whatever spiritual power is at work here is drawing not just from the character's own past, but also from the town's history. It does not really matter either way, but it is interesting to learn that Pyramid Head has a real-world source. It is not something that James conjured up out of nothing. Moving forward, let's talk about the Labyrinth. After exploring the prison, James descends even deeper into the nightmare. At this point, it no longer even resembles a real location. The Otherworld has become a twisting and confusing maze of monster-infested corridors, all designed to keep him away from Maria, who has been inexplicably resurrected but is trapped behind a set of iron bars. Pyramid Head can be found here too. He wanders around the maze, serving as an additional obstacle. The remake has added a new chase sequence where James has to push through all these weird glitchy bodies. And in both versions of the game, James is able to acquire Pyramid Head's weapon here, the massive heavy iron sword. In the original game, it is just a crappy, useless, slow, clunky weapon that you will never use in combat because it sucks. But in the remake, it has a different purpose altogether. Here, it is far too heavy to actually be wielded in combat. Instead, James uses it to carve a path through this nightmarish wall of monsters to finally reach Maria. By wielding Pyramid Head's signature weapon, the developers are spotlighting a connection between the two characters. Symbolically, James sort of becomes Pyramid Head in this moment. Of course, the truth is, James is Pyramid Head, or at least Pyramid Head is a part of himself. Anyway, let's move on to the final level of the game, and the conclusion of Pyramid Head's role in the story. At the hotel, James is finally confronted with the truth, with the fact that, driven by grief and resentment, he killed his own wife. After this revelation, he hears his wife's voice on the radio, though it's probably actually Maria's voice, and it draws him even deeper into the nightmare. There we find Maria captured by two Pyramid Heads. She is strung upside down, gasping in terror, struggling desperately with her binds, and calling out to James for help. He orders them to leave her alone, but they do not comply. Silently, callously, without expressing any emotion or hesitation at all, Pyramid Head once again brutally executes Maria. In this moment, we are witnessing their true historical purpose as unfeeling executioners, faceless avatars of death and guilt. Despite being manifestations of his own emotions, James has no control over Pyramid Head. He cannot order it to stop. They keep going because his own desire for punishment is not resolved, and Maria is the one who has to keep paying the price. At first, James screams in frustration and collapses to his knees, overcome by his emotions. But then he slowly calms down, gathers himself, and finally gets control over those emotions. And then he says this:
I know what you are. I know why I needed you. But it's all over now. I don't need you anymore. I'm ready.
Finally, James totally understands what the other world is, what the monsters are, and why these things are happening to him. This is something I plan to discuss more of in another video, but this is a realization that the other two characters lost in Silent Hill's other world, Angela and Eddie, never seem to come to. They are never able to control their emotions, never get the opportunity to overcome their demons, never get an opportunity to make a new choice, to change. Instead, they are both destroyed by their confrontations with the darkest parts of themselves. My point is that the other world is not a benevolent or malevolent place. It is morally neutral, a place of possibility, of both potential destruction and salvation. The other world does not care if it saves the people who are drawn inside, and neither does Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head does not care that James reaches this epiphany. They are manifestations of guilt and punishment, and so that's what they'll do. They will punish him. In many stories, the hero's final confrontation with the villain really serves as a confrontation with the worst aspects of their own character, and that has never been more true than in this boss battle. Here, James is confronting the ugliest and most twisted parts of his own psyche, the shame and the guilt and the desire for pain. He does not actually defeat Pyramid Head. Instead, his psyche transforms. He gains a command over himself that he did not have at the start of the game. And as his psyche changes, so do its manifestations in the other world. Pyramid Head is not killed in battle. He is killed by character growth. Pyramid Head is one of the most famous and most terrifying villains in horror video game history. From his bizarre and unsettling visual design, to his silent brutality, to his weird contradictory behavior, the way he flips back and forth from trying to kill the protagonist to letting us go to destroying himself, seemingly without explanation or reason. All of this has captured the imaginations of players like me for decades now. Silent Hill 2 has one of those stories that sticks with you long after the credits roll. because it is so enigmatic and so strange and so surreal. If you're anything like me, you can't help but asking yourself, what did it mean? Why did it happen that way? What were the developers and writers trying to accomplish here? And Pyramid Head is a big part of that. There are few horror villains who I find as fascinating as this guy, and I hope this video adds something to the thousands of hours of discourse that already exists surrounding this character. I plan to do 2 more videos on the Silent Hill 2 remake, one focused entirely on Maria, and another more general story analysis, following James' entire journey throughout the fog-laden town of Silent Hill. So, I will see you then. I find Maria to be a deeply tragic character. I do not think she begins her story as a villain. She is someone trapped and alone in a nightmare world, and the only other person she can interact with is James, who does not want her, who does not care about her, and who would gladly leave her behind if it meant finding the person he's actually looking for. Maria is a character who devolves over the course of the story. At the start, she is definitely pretty manipulative, but she also has these positive qualities. She is kind of playful and romantic. She is shown to feel protective towards Laura. She genuinely seems to want to help the girl. But as her circumstances become worse and worse, or perhaps as she comes to a better understanding of just how doomed she really is, all of those positive qualities disappear. She becomes more and more menacing and sinister and antagonistic, until finally she transforms into a horrific monster, all of her humanity torn away. Just like Pyramid Head and all of the other monsters throughout the game, Maria is something born of the strange and undefined spiritual power of Silent Hill, but she is also very different from all those others. The monsters of Silent Hill 2 are faceless, lacking individuality, and basically mindless. They do not appear to possess any true will of their own, whereas Maria seems to be an actual sentient living being with her own thoughts and feelings and fears and desires, even though those thoughts and feelings are all connected to James in some way. She is a doomed character, someone who will never have the chance to live a normal life, never get a chance to survive for longer than maybe a few hours at most. And when she realizes this, when she realizes that she is trapped, that she will never escape, that is when she finally transforms into this twisted monstrosity. At the end of the game, when she becomes this hideous nightmare creature, that is really her raging against the iron bars of her prison, against the horrific nature of her own existence. Because when James finally learns to let go, to embrace the truth, she is supposed to disappear or self-destruct in the same way that all the other manifestations of his guilt and shame do. But she refuses. She becomes angry and resentful. She decides that she is going to stick around. She will not let him move on. And that refusal is ultimately proof of her humanity and personhood. In this moment, maybe for the first time in the story, she is making a truly independent choice of her own personal free will. She is choosing to fight against her own fate, and there is nothing more human than that. So, Maria can be understood through her relationships with three other characters. First and most obviously, her relationship with James, which begins as playful, flirty, and openly seductive. She tries to play the role of damsel in distress to James' knight in shining armor, and she also plays the role of dark seductress, femme fatale. James has this morally pure goal of finding his lost wife, while Maria tries to lead him astray, to draw him off the righteous path, to tempt him with sinful pleasures like sex and alcohol. But all of these roles fall apart when they reach the hospital. As a manifestation of James' memories of his late wife, she is incapacitated by the same illness, and is later brutally killed by Pyramid Head. When she is reborn in the labyrinth, her behavior becomes far more menacing than it was before. She is jaded and cynical and sort of fairy-like here, unaffected by the grotesque and fantastical things happening all around her, a creature at home in the nightmare. This time she dies quietly off-screen of the same illness that killed Mary. And in the end, in her final scene, once again reborn, she becomes openly antagonistic. By refusing to fade away, she becomes the final obstacle James must overcome in order to escape from Silent Hill. Though that does depend on which ending we consider canon. I've always thought that the leave and in-water endings fit the themes of the story most appropriately, but the ending where Maria actually survives and leaves the town with him is really fascinating too, and we'll talk about that more later. Anyway, the second of Maria's defining relationships is with Laura. Maria and Laura never actually interact or even appear on screen together at the same time, but Maria's character is surprisingly focused on the girl. She spends a lot of time in this story attempting to find Laura so that she can protect her, so that Laura will not be alone. This reveals aspects of her character we never see in her interactions with James. She has these motherly and nurturing and benevolent qualities that she is never allowed to fully embrace. By the time she is reborn in the labyrinth, these motherly qualities have completely vanished. She no longer cares about Laura or anyone else. This relationship collapses before it ever really begins. The third and final defining relationship in her story is with Pyramid Head, which is a relationship entirely based on fear and pain and death. Pyramid Head kills her twice, and both times in brutal, terrifying, and horrific ways. It is this experience of death and terror that ultimately unravels her character, when she loses all of her more positive qualities, her playfulness and protectiveness. It is Pyramid Head who forces her to become the worst version of herself. A lot of fans talk about Pyramid Head as if he is this misunderstood guy, who is just trying to help out. He is a benevolent, guiding angel, leading James to let go of his denial and accept the truth. He is really just an avant-garde therapist with unconventional therapeutic techniques. But Maria, oh boy, she is the really bad one. She is the one you have to watch out for. She is the true monster of the story. I think this is an oversimplification of both characters and their roles in the story. Both Maria and Pyramid Head are manifestations of James' emotions, and because his emotions are complicated and contradictory, so are they. Maria is manipulative and defined by this inability to let go or move on, but also she is lonely and vulnerable in seeking companionship. Pyramid Head does end up helping James accept the truth, but he is also a creature whose entire existence is based on the emotions of guilt and fear and aggression and a desire for punishment. When he kills Maria, he is brutally murdering a sentient living person who does not deserve to be treated that way. Finally, there is also the Born of a Wish prologue chapter added in the definitive edition of the original game, but not included in the remake, or at least not as of the time this video is being posted. In that prologue, we see Maria before she meets James. She is a character who is utterly alone, trapped in a bizarre, surreal world full of monsters that she does not understand and cannot escape. She feels so lonely and so hopeless that she contemplates suicide, but ultimately chooses to live, to wait for James' arrival, for her one and only chance at companionship, which is all the more tragic because we, the audience, already know that relationship will never work out. That prologue paints her in a far more sympathetic light than the story of the main game. So what I want to do in this video is follow her story from beginning to end, to watch each scene to see how her character disintegrates over the course of the story, how she slowly loses everything and becomes this hopeless, menacing nightmare who refuses to allow James to escape at the end. Okay, let's start at the start with her introduction in Rosewater Park. We are going to watch that scene together, and as you watch, ask yourself, what are Maria's motivations and how are the developers revealing those motivations to us? What does she want and how do we know? Alright, here it is.
Mary? No. You're not.
Do I look like your girlfriend?
No, my late wife. I can't believe it. Your face, your voice, you could be...
My name is Maria. I don't look like a ghost, do I? See? Warm.
Sorry, I got confused.
Hey. Where are you going?
I need to find Mary.
Didn't you say she died?
Oh? Yeah. 3 years ago. It's just... I got a letter from her.
A letter?
I know how it sounds. I'm not... I don't...
Hey. It's okay. So, what did the letter say?
She said she was waiting for me. In our special place.
And that's here? Anyway, I haven't seen her. Is this your only special place?
I don't know anymore. There was something. I can't quite.
Hey! I think I might know. I mean, there's this one place. Not far from here.
What kind of place?
The kind two lovers might call special. I can show you if you want. Unless you have somewhere else to be. Something else to do. Hey, easy there. I'm just messing with you. Come on. It's this way.
You're coming with me? Can't you just tell me where it is?
Wait. You're just gonna leave me here? Alone? With all these monsters around?
No, I just...
Is it because I remind you of her? You loved her, didn't you?
I think her motivations are very clear here. Maria wants James. She almost immediately hyper-focuses on him. She very quickly initiates physical contact. She is flirty and seductive. She is touchy and pushy. She distracts him, pulls him away from his journey to find his wife. At the end of the scene, when he gazes out across the lake, saying that he can almost remember something, that is him about to come to the realization that Mary is waiting for him at the hotel, or at least something related to Mary is waiting for him at the hotel. Notice the way Maria moves into center frame, the way she stands between him and his true destination, interrupts him before he can come to that realization, and instead leads him in the exact opposite direction. That final shot, which drifts over the lake and shows us the light on the other side, that is what she prevented him from seeing. And it does feel intentional. She is purposely attempting to insert herself as the new focal point of his journey to replace Mary. And in this first scene, there is definitely something subtly sinister and unsettling about her behavior. It is so inconsistent with everything else that is happening around them. Her behavior is just too ordinary in an extraordinary situation. By this point in the story, James has already encountered some really freaky and crazy and terrifying stuff. And then here is Maria acting like nothing is wrong, apparently just trying to get laid. All of the other characters we have met have been searching for something, been focused on their own goals, their own stories. Like Angela is focused on her mother, Eddie is looking for somewhere to run away to. But Maria has no reason to be in this town. She is only focused on James, and it's weird. And of course, all of that ignores the bizarre similarities between her and his dead wife. Even their names are eerily similar. So why? Why does she want James? Why is she trying so hard to distract him from his wife and get him to focus on her instead? Well, Maria is a manifestation of James' desires and emotions, of his psyche. He wants his wife back for her to live again, and so by the strange power of Silent Hill, here she is, returned to the flesh. But James' emotions are twisted and warped by anger and guilt and lust, and so this reborn version of his wife emerges from the fog twisted and changed too. More sexualized, more voluptuous, more selfish, more desperate for human contact. But let's look at this from Maria's perspective. What is going on in her head? Going forward, it will begin to become clear that a lot of her behavior is driven by instinct. To put it simply, she does what feels right. Silent Hill's Otherworld has manifested her to fulfill a particular role, and when she gets closer to that role, she seems to feel better. So she wants to be with James because that is where she is supposed to be. That is where she was born to be. And there's another motivation here too. Going forward, we will also learn that Maria is a genuinely lonely person. She wants companionship. She wants a relationship. She wants romance. She wants a family. She wants to be with others. She wants to be around both James and later Laura. Not all of her motivations are sinister. And as I said at the beginning of the video, without James, she would be completely isolated, completely alone forever. And I think that possibility really frightens her. Unfortunately for her, her seduction is not working here. Again and again, James refuses her advances. He does not want to go with her, and so she tries a different tactic. When he is about to leave without her, all of a sudden she acknowledges the existence of the monsters in the town and uses them as a way to bind James to her. She appeals to his sense of empathy. Would you really leave me alone here in this dangerous place? And finally, this one works. They leave together. The remake has added a ton of interactions between them during this section of the game that go a long way towards further developing her character. For example, in dialogue, she pushes James to talk about himself, to talk about his late wife. This is her trying to forge an emotional bond between them. She is playful. She makes a lot of jokes. She reacts to things in the environment or things he does, like when he breaks windows or when he falls into a stupor in the save menu. As I discussed earlier, she is the damsel in distress to his knight in shining armor. She behaves as if she is defenseless against these monsters, and he has to come to her rescue. This allows him to live out a certain type of fantasy. He is able to successfully protect her from monsters in a way he was never able to protect his wife from her illness. And she is still manipulative. When James begins walking towards the hotel, towards his true destination, she tries again and again to get him to turn around, to go where she wants instead. Finally, there is this moment when you examine a statue of a woman who was accused of unstated crimes and murdered by the people of Silent Hill in the past. James asks, who was she? And Maria answers,
Just a woman. Killed for no real fault of her own by moral, upstanding folk. Common theme, I guess.
What do you mean?
In history, you know?
I think it's clear that Maria identifies with this woman, that she feels as if she is being persecuted for no fault of her own, that she feels as if she has done nothing wrong and is being punished unfairly. It is important to remember that Maria did not choose to be born. She did not choose to be a facsimile of James' dead wife. She was forced into this situation. In some ways, she is doing the only thing she can do, given her circumstances. Next, she leads James to the Heaven's Night strip club, where she apparently works as a stripper, again connecting her character to the themes of sexuality and lust. In the original game, the characters quickly pass through this location without stopping, but in the remake, the developers have added a whole new scene. We are going to watch it together, and as we do, we are going to play a game. This is by far Maria's most manipulative scene in the story. I have identified at least 5 different methods of manipulation she attempts to use, 5 distinct strategies to distract him and seduce him. Only one of those 5 strategies seems to have any real effect on James though. So as you watch, see if you can find all 5, and for bonus points, figure out which one actually worked. Okay, here it is.
What? Oh, come on, don't give me that look. I was just kidding. Then again, now that we're here, can we stay? Just for a little while. Catch our breath before we head back out there.
I don't have time to take a break. Mary could be out there, waiting for me.
I know. It's just... this place, this whole thing, it's like a nightmare. I just wanted to get away from it, even for a second. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I guess this place is getting to me, too. Am I crazy? You know, for thinking she could be here.
Crazy is one word for it, I guess. I can think of another.
And what's that?
Hopeful.
Well, that's a nicer way of putting it.
Here.
What are you doing?
Something to take the edge off. No? You sure? Fine. Be that way. Here's to... hope undying.
The first method can be seen when she comes out on stage, grabs the pole, and does a little spin. This is manipulation by sexuality, and when it fails, when James does not show any interest, she plays it off as a joke and moves on to the next. Next, she attempts manipulation by appealing to his need for rest. What if we just stop and rest for a minute, just for a little while? Take the load off, man. And again, it fails. James wants to go find his wife right now. He does not have time for relaxation. And then Maria attempts manipulation by damsel in distress, by appealing to his sense of empathy, his protectiveness. Oh, I'm just a scared little delicate flower who cannot defend herself, lost in a dangerous world, overwhelmed by stress, in need of a big strong man to help me. Oh no! She even pretends to be on the verge of tears, tears which suspiciously disappear only moments later. This is the manipulation strategy that works. This is the one that gets James to pause, to focus on her. Somewhere at his core, James is a protective type of personality. He wants to help others. The next is manipulation by adulation. This is one I discussed in detail back in my video on Odin from God of War Ragnarok. One of Odin's most effective manipulation techniques was heaping a mixture of exaggerated criticism and compliments upon other characters. Compliments are a really easy way to get other people to like you, and that is what Maria is doing when James asks her, "Am I crazy?" And she gazes longingly into his eyes and says, "No, you're hopeful." And the final attempt is manipulation by alcohol. Get them drunk and you can get a lot more out of them too. But this one does not work. James refuses the offer of a drink. In addition to the manipulation, I think there is a lot of sadness in Maria's dialogue and behavior here too. She seems genuinely disappointed and maybe even a little hurt that he refuses to spend time with her. It is important to remember that James is literally the only other living person Maria has ever met or will ever have any interaction with. She is not necessarily manipulating him because she wants to hurt him, but because she genuinely wants him to stay with her, wants the chance to forge an emotional connection with someone. Anyway, let's move on to the next scene, which takes place in the Moonlight Grove. This scene is also original to the remake. It was added to expand on her character and motivations. This is, I think, in contrast to the previous one, her most sympathetic scene in the story. As you watch, ask yourself, what does this scene add to her character? What do we understand about her now that we would not have otherwise if this scene was left out? Okay, here it is.
There's a story told around these parts, kind of a local legend. It tells of a woman who was cast out, sentenced to die on an island out on the lake. There was a man in town who fell madly in love with her. And every night, he would sneak out, row across the lake, bringing her food and company. And every night, she would stand there on the shore, holding a lit candle to help him find his way. But this one night, a terrible storm broke out, caught him out in the open, and it blew out the candle. Even in darkness, the man would not give up. He would not turn back. So he fought against the raging waters until finally the lake took him. They say even then, the woman never lost hope. She kept coming out at night, kept lighting the candle to bring her beloved home, to lead him to shore.
Maria tells a story about a tragic, undying love. A love that survives even death. A love so powerful that it becomes a legend, inspiring generations of young romantic couples. You can hear a yearning in her voice. It is clear that she wants this. She wants a man who will love her so much that he is willing to flaunt the laws of his people, risk the judgment of his peers, willing to brave the dangerous dark waters of the lake, to travel through terrible storms, all just to reach her. This is who she wants James to be for her. That is why she is so hyper-focused on him, so touchy and pushy. This scene reveals that Maria is not just some conniving, sinister femme fatale. She is also a hopeless romantic. She holds on to this idea of an idealized fairy tale romance that will never come true. And James has no interest in any of this, any interest in her. He acts as if he is irritated by her monologue. He perceives this as a big waste of time. Once again, her attempts at seduction, at getting closer to him, are failing. There is a double irony in the story she tells. On the one hand, this fairy tale describes James' current circumstances. He loves his wife Mary so much that he is willing to go through all these horrific and terrible challenges in Silent Hill just for the near zero chance that he might get to see her again. But on the other hand, this does not describe James at all. His love for his wife was already tested by a terrible challenge, by her long, fatal illness, and he has already failed. By the end of that illness, their relationship had collapsed. Not only did he not die trying to save her, he was the one who killed her because he could not bear the stress and the grief and the resentment anymore. So this idealized perfect romance that Maria is searching for simply does not exist anywhere in this story. The next scene we are going to watch takes place in the hospital, and I think this scene reveals some really important information about what Maria is and how her emotions work. So here it is.
Maria? Hey. You okay?
I'm sorry.
That's fine. What's going on? Are you hurt?
It's nothing. Probably just a hangover.
Maybe you should rest.
Yeah. Okay. So comfy.
I'm gonna go look for Laura. I'll be back as soon as I can.
I love the framing of this shot. Maria revealed in darkness, overcome by sickness. She is an amalgamation of James' feelings for and memories of his wife, and of course after her long illness. All of his memories of her are touched by that illness too, and so it manifests in Maria as well. The most fascinating part of the scene is when she lies down on this disgusting, stained mattress in the middle of this decaying, rundown, very frightening hospital, and then says, "Oh, so comfy." And like, no way. There is no way in hell that bed is comfortable. Hospital beds are notoriously uncomfortable even in the best of times, and this is far from the best of times. With this bizarre comment, I think the writers are trying to reveal something about how Maria's emotions work. She is not comfortable because this bed is comfortable. She is comfortable because she is falling into the role that has been laid out for her. By lying down in the hospital bed, she is behaving the correct way as a manifestation of Mary, reliving the part of the sick wife. This is what led me to my theory that Maria's behavior is driven by instinct. She does what feels right to her. She lies down in this bed because, for reasons she probably does not even understand, it gives her pleasure to do so. And I think that is the same reason she is trying so hard to be with James. She is not some master manipulator with a grand, sinister conspiracy. She is a creation with a particular role to fill, and it is not until the end of her story that she finally attempts to break out of that role. That final question, what will you do if you can't find your wife? She is hoping the answer will be that he will stay with her instead. In one of the endings, this wish does come true, but it does not turn out to be as pleasant as she had hoped, and we will discuss that more later. After this scene, James leaves Maria behind in this room while he continues to explore the hospital alone. If you return to her, she keeps asking about Laura. Have you found Laura yet? Where is she? Eventually, the hospital is transformed into a terrifying nightmare world, and this is where James reunites with her. I think this is the scene where Maria's collapse truly begins, where she is set on the downward journey that will end with her character transforming into that hideous monster we talked about earlier. And as you watch, see if you can figure out why. What happens to her here that sets her on the path of self-destruction? Okay, here it is.
James.
Mary! Oh. Maria, I thought... Sorry. Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? I was almost killed back there. I have never been so scared in my whole life. All you care about is that dead wife of yours. You couldn't care less about me, could you?
No, I just...
Then stay with me. Don't leave me alone again. You're supposed to take care of me. So what about Laura? You found her?
Yeah, but she ran away.
What? Well, we have to find her.
Yeah, you really seem to care about that girl. Do you know her?
I'd never met her before. I just feel sorry for her. She's all alone and... I don't know, for some reason I feel like it's up to me to protect her.
Maria is extremely relieved to be reunited with James, and at first, he is happy to see her too, because he mistakes her for Mary. When he realizes his mistake, he makes no attempt to disguise his disappointment. Through his body language and words, he makes it very obvious that he is not happy to see her, that he does not want her, and she is understandably upset. The only other person in her world, the person she is supposed to be with, just does not care about her well-being. That line, "You're supposed to take care of me," is very telling. From her perspective, James is not fulfilling the role set out for him. He is not seduced by her charms. He is not falling in love with her. He is not protecting her, and still he pulls away. This scene also reveals the nature of her relationship with Laura, why she is so focused on rescuing the girl. It is instinctual. She has this instinct, this feeling that she is supposed to protect her. This is a piece of Mary, genuinely reborn in Maria's psychology. As we will learn later, Mary was something of a surrogate mother to Laura. They had a close relationship. Mary even wanted to adopt her, and these feelings have been passed on to Maria, feelings that James does not know anything about. He had never met Laura. He was not aware of their relationship. This reveals that Maria is more than just a manifestation of his feelings and his memories. There are pieces of the true Mary inside of her too, and it also has to do with loneliness. Laura is left all alone, which is the thing Maria fears most. Her worst case scenario is being left alone in this nightmare world, with no one to care for her, no one to be with. She wants to save this girl she's never even met from that fate. This is Maria at her best, her most benevolent, and it is unfortunate that the town of Silent Hill never allows her to more fully express these feelings. She is destroyed before she ever gets a chance to be a better version of herself. Soon after this scene, Maria is killed by Pyramid Head, and I swear I have seen fans say things like, "Oh, Pyramid Head is such a great guy. He is just helping James out by brutally murdering this defenseless woman in the most grotesque and terrifying and traumatic way possible. He has to show James that she is fake, which is, somehow accomplished by torturing and killing her for no reason." So let's try to look at this story from Maria's perspective. As we see in the Born of a Wish prologue, she wakes up in this empty town full of monsters. She does not know what she is doing here or why she is all alone. She does not understand any of this. She meets James, the only other living person around, not counting the one dude who was in the Baldwin mansion who sent her on a bunch of weird fetch quests and who we're not going to talk about, and she feels some connection to James. She knows she is supposed to be with him. She can feel it, but he keeps pushing her away no matter what she tries. He abandons her, leaves her behind in a nightmare world, makes it clear that he does not care about her when they are reunited. And then, all of a sudden, she is being chased through a labyrinth by this terrifying monster. She does not know what Pyramid Head is or why it wants to hurt her. Silent Hill will not let her escape. So she dies in terror and pain and dread in one of the worst ways possible, never truly understanding the nature of her own existence, why any of this is happening to her, why she is being targeted this way. From Maria's perspective, this is a truly horrific story. Moving forward in her next appearance, we will see a Maria who has transformed. All of her positive qualities, her playfulness, her flirtiness, her protectiveness have vanished. And of course they have. In the exact same way that the town of Silent Hill breaks both Eddie and Angela, the way it turns them onto the paths of paranoia, murder, and suicide, it breaks Maria too. And just like that statue of the woman, it is through no fault of her own. What did she do to deserve this terrible fate? Unlike James, she did not kill anybody. Unlike Eddie, she did not poison some dog. She never hurt anyone. But somehow, by whatever power that rules over Silent Hill's other world, Maria is reborn in the labyrinth. And we are going to watch that scene together now. As we watch, ask yourself, is this even the same person? Do the developers really want us to believe that this is the same Maria who died in the basement underneath the hospital? Okay, here it is.
Maria? Maria! I thought that thing killed you. Are you hurt?
Not at all, silly.
But the thing... It stabbed you. There was blood everywhere.
Stabbed me? What do you mean?
It chased us to the elevator and then...
James, what are you talking about?
Just before. Don't you remember?
James? Honey? Did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else? You were always so forgetful. Remember that time in the hotel?
Maria?
You said you took everything. But you forgot that videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
So you are Maria.
I am. If you want me to be.
All I want from you is an answer.
It doesn't matter who I am. I am here for you, James. See? I'm real. Don't you want to touch me?
I don't know.
Well, if you happen to make up your mind, I'll be waiting.
It has long been my theory that this is not the same Maria as before. That character is dead and will stay dead. Just look at the way her behavior has changed. Notice how she seems to have completely forgotten about the existence of Laura. The way her memories of what happened underneath the hospital seem incomplete or incorrect. So yes, this is a new Maria, a new manifestation of James' emotions. And because of the trauma he has experienced during his time in Silent Hill, the terror, the confusion, the pain, his feelings are becoming more twisted and more warped and more disconnected from reality. And so this new version of Maria becomes more twisted and more warped too. She barely even behaves like a real person anymore. She has no reaction whatsoever to being trapped in a prison inside some bizarre nightmare labyrinth. She just sits there humming to herself as if, whoopity-doopity, everything is fine. The line between Maria and Mary has also been blurred to the point where it is difficult to tell them apart. The character switches from one to the other, from speaking in Mary's voice to speaking in Maria's voice. She has the memories of two different people in her head. I also want to discuss the framing of this shot. In film, just about any time you see a character through bars like this, that is a visual language which is meant to communicate to an audience that this character is trapped, not literally, but metaphorically somehow. A character trapped in a prison cell is not a powerful character, not a character in control of her own fate, not a character with the freedom to choose her own path. The visual language of this scene shows us that Maria is not the mastermind behind this plot. She is just as trapped in this nightmare as James is, who we also see framed between prison bars in this scene. Her dialogue here, "I'm not Mary, I'm whoever you want me to be, I'm here for you," reveals a lack of a solid identity, of individual personhood. I don't think Maria even knows who she is anymore. All she knows is that she exists for James' sake. Her entire existence revolves around him, around his desire for her. She has lost so much of the personality that defined her earlier. And in this scene, James' defenses finally begin to weaken. He can no longer resist her advances. Before, he was easily able to say no to her, to stay loyal to his wife. But by this point in the story, Silent Hill is breaking him down too. After navigating the labyrinth and reaching the other side of that prison cell, James finds Maria already dead, apparently killed by the same disease that killed his wife. This version of Maria only lived for a couple hours, if even that long. Most insects are granted longer lives than she had. She has a truly doomed existence. At first, James is overcome with emotion upon seeing her dead body. He lovingly caresses her hand, but then his grief slowly dissipates, as if he is realizing, wait a second, this is not my wife. I do not love this woman. And just like that, he forgets her and moves on, once again focused on finding Mary instead. In the end, Maria does not even have someone to grieve for her after she is dead. When she dies, she is just gone. Except not, because Silent Hill keeps bringing her back and killing her again and again. Once again, let's try to look at this from Maria's perspective. This is a terrible existence. You awake over and over into a world you do not understand, alone and unloved, only to die again a couple hours later, either succumb to a painful illness or brutally murdered and executed for crimes you didn't even know you committed. There is no character in Silent Hill 2 who gets a shorter end of the stick than Maria. Is it really any surprise that she transforms into a monster at the end? Speaking of which, let's move on to that ending, to Maria's final scene. When James has finally overcome his denial, accepted the truth that he was the one who killed his wife, and is ready to face the future, whatever that future might be. Now, there are a couple different ways this final interaction can play out, depending on which ending you get. I am going to play the leave ending version of the scene for us, because I think, from Maria's perspective, this is the most tragic version. In this ending, James is allowed to leave the town with Laura, to go live happily ever after, to let go of the past and move on, and that includes letting go of Maria too. Her existence no longer has any purpose. Just like Pyramid Head, she is supposed to self-destruct, to disappear, as if she never existed at all. But unlike Pyramid Head, Maria has an individual will of her own. She has thoughts and feelings. She does not want to disappear. She refuses to let James go, because it would mean the end of her own life too. And that is what transforms her into the final antagonist of the story. So let's watch the scene together now. Here it is.
Mary? I have missed you so much.
I've missed you too. We can finally be together. Forever.
No.
James. Honey. What's wrong?
I'm sorry. I know you tried,
James, please.
but she's gone. I know that now,
Stop it.
and I can't just keep pretending.
Shut up! What do you want? Do you even know anymore? I'm yours. I'm here for you. So what if I'm not her? I can give you what she never could. I can be better than her. What else do you want me to be? What else can I be?
I am so sorry, Maria. I really am. But this has to stop. It's time to let it go.
No.
What?
I won't let you do this to me. I won't let you go. I can't!
At first, Maria makes one final attempt at seduction. If she cannot seduce him as Maria, cannot persuade him to choose her over Mary, then she will become Mary, become exactly what he wants. And it still does not work. James easily sees through the ruse and once again refuses her. Maria makes one more desperate last attempt. I can be better than her. I can give you what she couldn't. I can be anything you want. She tries begging. She tries crying. She tries the damsel in distress act again. In this moment, she appears pathetic, pleading, and almost frantic in her behavior, trying anything and everything to get him to stay with her, and none of it works. He does not want her. And then her dialogue turns truly sinister. No, I won't just give up and disappear the way Pyramid Head did. I am going to fight. In a lot of video games, when the villain transforms into a horrific monster during the final boss battle, that is the character revealing who they really were all along. Their new, disgusting outer form changes to match who they truly were deep down inside. But I do not think that applies to this scene. I do not believe Maria was a monster all along. I am going to make a comparison to Eddie. He is a character who begins the story as sort of pathetic, but not actively dangerous or murderous. He is mostly just a scared kid who is running away from his problems. But his journey through the nightmare of Silent Hill, his experience of being confronted by his crimes, by the worst parts of himself, by his worst memories, causes his personality to disintegrate. By the end, he becomes a monster too, a paranoid and pathetic murderer who kills because it is the only way he can feel powerful, the only way to stop feeling like such a loser. This is what Silent Hill does to people. Even though she is a creation of Silent Hill, Maria is not immune to the town's corrosive effects. The pain, the terror, the loneliness, and the frustration she has experienced here transforms her into something worse than what she started out as. In the end, after the battle is over, she is left powerless and weak, unable to even lift herself off the ground, unable to do anything other than call out James' name over and over again, a final, hopeless plea before he kills her for the last time. It is one of the saddest and most pitiful ends I've ever seen for a video game villain. To me, Maria was always the most tragic character in Silent Hill 2. Unlike all these other characters, she is not being punished for crimes she committed in her past. She was not drawn into Silent Hill from outside. She was never given a choice to come here. She was born here. But there is another ending. One where Maria succeeds, where she actually does convince James to choose her over his wife, where he refuses to let go and she actually gets to leave the town with him. Let's watch that one together to see if this is her happy ending. Here it is.
Better do something about that cough.
So no, this is not a happy ending at all. That final line from James, "You better do something about that cough," is so ugly and so abrasive and so unkind. It makes you hate him. You can already tell this is going to be a toxic and unhealthy relationship, not based on love, but instead on selfish need, a refusal to let go of the past. And it is also a relationship that is not going to last. The cough suggests that Maria is infected with the same illness that Mary had, and that she has already been condemned to die in the same long, drawn-out, painful way that Mary did. So there is no version of this story where Maria gets a happy ending. She was doomed to a life of pain and suffering right from the very beginning, and never had any chance to escape. And that is the end of my analysis of Maria's character. I have one more video on the Silent Hill 2 remake planned. This will be a more general story analysis in which I will discuss James, Angela, Eddie, and Laura. So see you then. The primary theme of Silent Hill 2's game has some truth they are either refusing to accept or running away from. Despite how twisted and warped and bizarre it might appear, Silent Hill's Otherworld is actually a place defined by truth. It shows these characters who they really are. Through elaborate illusion, it forces them to confront reality. I am going to focus my analysis on 3 characters: James, Angela, and Eddie. Each of these characters is actually denying two truths, one big obvious truth and then a subtler, uglier, more sinister truth lying underneath. It is this second truth that ultimately destroys them. Because in the world of Silent Hill 2, truth is not healing, not nourishing. Sometimes fans treat Silent Hill 2 as if it is some big therapy session, as if the town is just trying to help these characters overcome their denial and become better people. If anything, it is the exact opposite. James, Angela, and Eddie are all crushed by the truth. They are tortured by it. As we see very intimately in James' storyline, the truth is a hellscape to him. It is a strange and cruel nightmare full of hideous monsters from which he cannot escape. Okay, so let's talk more about James. In the very first shot of the game, we see him gazing into a bathroom mirror, into his own shadowy reflection. In the visual language of film, just about any time you see a character looking into a mirror this way, and so you see two versions of the same character on screen at the same time, this doubling effect is meant to communicate that this character has another self, often a darker self. There is more to him than meets the eye. At the start of the game, James is presented as a quiet and thoughtful character. He is wounded and full of sorrow. He lost his wife to an unnamed disease 3 years ago and has never recovered from that loss. He is defined more than anything by his love for her, by how much he is willing to do for her, how much terror and pain and suffering he is willing to endure over the course of this story just for the slim chance that she might somehow, impossibly, be waiting for him somewhere in this town. He is on a journey down into unfathomable darkness. Most sane people would have given up and turned around and run away very early into this story. For James to keep going forward despite all the terrible things that happened to him, there must be something really profound fueling his determination. And the source of that determination can only be his love for his late wife Mary, which is apparently enough to drive him to do almost anything. Except maybe not, but we'll discuss that more later. In his interactions with other characters, James tends to be soft-spoken, polite, kind, and moral. He wants to help Angela, wants to deter her from self-harm. He tries to persuade Eddie to flee to safety. He wants to keep Laura and Maria safe too. He seems like a good person. But every now and then we see glimpses of his other self, the darkness within him, like when he angrily accuses Laura of being a liar. And of course, towards the end of the game, that darkness is put on full display when it is revealed that he murdered his own wife. She did not die of her disease. She died by suffocation, as her own husband brutally smothered her face with a pillow. There was a monster lurking inside this seemingly soft-spoken good guy all along. But that is only the big obvious truth. That is not the truth that destroys him. There is something even worse, even more terrible yet to be revealed. James is not only in denial that he was the one who killed his wife, he is also in denial over when his wife's death occurred. He believes she died 3 years ago, when in reality, he murdered her days ago at most. It happened very recently. But why? Why this denial of the timeline? What happened during those 3 years that he does not want to remember? Well, after defeating Pyramid Head, the avatar of his guilt and shame and desire for punishment, and while he approaches the final confrontation with Maria, who is the avatar of his inability to let go of his wife after her death, we hear an echo of an interaction between James and Mary. And this interaction shows us what he is truly running from. We are going to listen to this echo together now, and as you listen, ask yourself, what is being revealed here? And what makes this an even more terrible revelation than the fact that he killed his own wife? Okay, here it is.
What do you want, James? Flowers? I don't want any damn flowers. Just go home already. Look at me. I'm disgusting. Between the disease and the drugs, I look like a monster. Well, what are you looking at? Get the hell out of here. Leave me alone already. I'm no use to anyone. I'll be dead soon anyway. It'd be easier if they just killed me. But I guess the hospital's making a nice profit off of me. Why are you still here? I told you to go. Are you deaf? Don't come back. James. Wait. Please. Don't go. Don't leave me alone. I didn't mean what I said. Please. Tell me I'll be okay. Tell me I'm not gonna die. Help me.
In this echo, we are witnessing the disintegration of James and Mary's relationship. For most of the story, Mary does not get a lot of character development. Because she is already dead at the start, she does not appear much on screen, only in little brief flashbacks, where she is portrayed as a vaguely loving and tender wife. She is less of a character and more of an idealized archetype, something for James to pursue, to long for. But in this echo, she suddenly bursts out onto the stage as a very complex and human character. She expresses a wide range of complicated and contradictory emotions. Confronted by her own mortality, by the fact that nothing would stop the disease, that she was going to die, she suffered from a kind of emotional collapse. She swung from hope to hopelessness, from denial to depression to anger. She became filled with rage. She lashed out at the people closest to her. She made them feel the same misery that she felt. And then afterwards, she was overcome by sadness, by a need for human connection and comfort, by a need to be with the very person she had just pushed away. This is what James is really hiding from, the fact that his relationship with her had collapsed. That, because he could not handle her emotional distress, he had essentially abandoned her in the hospital, all alone with her pain and sickness. As Laura says, eventually James stopped visiting her at all, because he could not face her rage or her misery. He was too weak. In their final interaction in the other world, James at first tries to claim that her murder was altruistic, that he was simply ending her suffering for her sake. But then he corrects himself. The truth was, he did it for himself. He did it because he had grown to hate her, hate what she had done to him, the miserable person she had turned him into, the way her sickness had taken over his life. He hated her for making him hate her. He wanted it to all be over. The reason why he cuts all 3 of those years out of his memory is because it was during those 3 years that his love for Mary was truly tested, and he failed. His love was not strong enough. He was not strong enough. Her sickness, her rage, transformed him first into a coward and then into a killer. He wants to forget all of that and only remember the time when they were in love, before it all went wrong. It was not the truth of what he had done that he could not face, it was the truth of who he was, who he had become. There is an ending where James leaves the town with Laura, apparently healed by his experience in Silent Hill, where he is somehow able to not only move past his wife's murder, but also what that murder revealed about him and who he truly is. But there are more endings where he is not able to heal and move on, where he either desperately clings to some version of Mary or where he chooses to destroy himself. The other 2 characters we are going to discuss do not receive these generous options. They do not get any chance to heal and leave and move on. Angela and Eddie both only get one ending, and it is not a happy one. But before we move on, I do quickly want to talk about something else. This is probably going to sound like a crazy comparison, but Joel from The Last of Us always reminded me of James. Okay, let me explain. These are not just the main characters of their respective stories, but the player characters. Because we are in direct control of them, I think we naturally develop an intimacy with them. These characters are us to some extent. They are our avatars in this fictional world. Their success or failure is our success or failure. And perhaps even more than that, because we spend so much time with them, we witness their humanity. We see them at their best. When they're fighting to do the right thing, we see their suffering and their pain, and how hard they fight to overcome each challenge. We become deeply invested in their journeys. And so when we finally see them commit these terrible, awful, perhaps even unforgivable crimes, it can lead to a really fascinating emotional experience for the audience. How do we react when these characters, who we have invested so much time and feeling into, when they do things that we ourselves would never choose to do, that we cannot condone or justify? You can see similar audience reactions to both characters. Sometimes people will finish the games and say, oh, Joel or James is a monster, a criminal, a murderer, a terrible, evil person, and I don't like him just one bit. It's almost as if they have been betrayed by that character. At the other end of the perspective, you have people saying things like, oh, I love James or Joel. I feel so close to him. I wish he was my dad or my husband. Everything he did was justified. Of course, there is a middle road here where we can recognize that these characters are written to be complicated and contradictory, to be both generous and selfish, to be both empathetic and monstrous, which makes them feel far more real than a character who is only evil or only good. I guess I don't have a real point here, I just find the comparison interesting. Anyway, let's move on to the second character from Silent Hill 2 that we are going to discuss, Angela. In many ways, Angela is clearly intended to serve as a foil to James. She is on a very similar quest to his own. She has come to this strange town in search of someone close to her, someone she cares very deeply for. In her case, she is searching for her mother. Their two journeys parallel each other. She explores her own nightmare world, her own personal psychological hellscape. Just like James, there are two truths to be revealed in her background. A big obvious one, and then a much uglier and more sinister truth underneath. She is slowly ground down by her time in Silent Hill, and by the end has seemingly given up all hope. Her ultimate fate demonstrates one possible end to his own story. But let's start over from the beginning. We first meet Angela in the graveyard near the beginning of the game. With this setting, the writers are immediately making a connection between her character and death, mortality, and melancholy. Her behavior feels distinctly off in this first scene, like there's something not quite right here. She is very young and completely alone. She seems a bit confused. She is looking for multiple family members, but does not appear to have any clue where any of them might be. She is anxious and nervous and suspicious, and she offers this vague warning about the town. You shouldn't go there, there's something wrong, maybe dangerous. The next time we see her is in the apartment building, and notice how the writers are reusing this doubling imagery with the mirror. Once again, through the visual language of the scene, they are telling us there is something else to this girl. She is more than she appears to be. In this scene, she is portrayed to be depressed and clearly experiencing some suicidal ideation. She is emotionally erratic, switching dramatically between melancholy and accusatory, from panicked and defensive to pleading and desperate. She is all over the emotional map. She has some serious psychological wounds. James takes away her knife, so at least for now, she cannot act on any thoughts of self-harm she might have. The remake added a new scene with her in the park, but I'm gonna skip right past it, to the next scene, which takes place down in the labyrinth. This is one of the most disturbing scenes in the entire Silent Hill franchise, and has only become more so with the changes made in the remake. This is the Abstract Daddy boss fight. This monster is shaped like two human figures lying on a mattress. One figure is larger than the other, and the larger one is lying on top of the smaller, in a position that is clearly meant to appear sexual. In the remake, this monster chases our character through a nightmare version of Angela's childhood home, seemingly unstoppable, where the only safe place is in a little closet with a stuffed animal, the sort of place a child might hide. It is one of the most genuinely terrifying and unsettling sequences I have ever seen in a horror video game. It is masterclass work. This is the reveal of the big obvious truth in Angela's storyline. Her father emotionally, physically, and sexually abused her, and in the end she killed him to save herself. But believe it or not, there is an even worse truth yet to be revealed here. Her storyline is about as dark gets. Following this boss fight, Angela, in a rage, accuses James of pursuing her, of having ulterior motives for helping her, and of being unfaithful to his wife, all of which she somewhat weakly attempts to deny. And then she leaves, saying that she still needs to find her mother. In her desire to find her, there's a suggestion that even though her father was a monster, maybe she had a good relationship with the other parent. Maybe her mother was her safe haven, her protector, someone who loved and cared about her, you know, the way a parent is supposed to. However, in her final scene, something else is revealed, that subtler, uglier truth, the one that finally destroys her. Just like last time, we are going to watch this scene together and once again ask yourself, what is being revealed here and why is it even worse than what we've already been shown? Okay, here it is.
Mama? Mama, I was looking for you. You're the only one left. Maybe then I can finally rest. Mama. What's wrong? Wait. You're not my mama. It's you.
I'm sorry, Angela. I think you were right. What we're looking for, it's not here. Not anymore.
Thank you for helping me earlier. But I wish you hadn't. Even Mama said it. I deserve what happened.
No, Angela, that is not true.
Don't pity me. I'm not worth it. Or maybe you think you can save me? Will you love me? Care for me? Heal all my pain? That's what I thought. James. Give me back the knife.
No, I won't.
Saving it for yourself. Have it your way. It doesn't change anything.
In this scene, it is revealed that Angela's mother, that person she has been so desperately searching for the entire game, the one we thought might be the good parent, the one who really cared for and loved her daughter, was actually just as horrid and hideous as her father. Angela did not have any safe haven. She did not have anyone to protect her. She has spent all this time searching for someone who does not want her. And when she finally accepts this truth, it destroys her. She has nothing left to cling to. Just like with James, the town of Silent Hill has forced her to confront reality, and that reality might as well be hell. For this one scene, we see Silent Hill from her perspective, a place permanently burning, a place of fire and pain, flames that can never be put out, damage that can never be repaired. She has come to believe that no one will ever love her, care for her, or heal all of her pain. How could they if even her mother did not? James' silence in the face of her question only confirms it for her. That is when she asks for the knife back. She has made a decision. Her time in Silent Hill has caused her to finally lose all hope. In this moment, she chooses self-destruction. And listen to how calm and cold her voice is when she asks for the knife, how the emotion has drained from her voice, as if she is empty and hollow. This mirrors a potential end for James' own story, in which he drives his car into the lake. There is a note you can find in the hospital which discusses a patient. This patient suffers from some form of hallucinations or delusions. He has crossed over to somewhere else, probably Silent Hill's other world. However, suffer is not really the correct word, because his delusions are more pleasant than reality. He is happy there. The doctor writing the note questions whether it is really the right thing to force the patient out of that happy fake world and into harsh, unhappy reality. We could ask the same question about Angela. Is she really better off knowing the truth? Or was she better off when she believed a lie? When she believed her mother still loved her, still wanted her? When that belief still gave her some form of hope to cling to? Of course, the story of Silent Hill 2 offers no objective answer to that question. It is left to the audience to ponder. We still have one character left to discuss, Eddie. Eddie is another foil to James. Whereas Angela reflects his misery and his depression, Eddie reflects his violence, his resentment, those uglier aspects of his personality. Unlike the other two, Eddie is not searching for anyone. Instead, he is running away, looking for somewhere to hide. In the same way that Silent Hill creates Maria, a living, breathing, sentient person, a fulfillment of James' desire to reunite with his dead wife, a reflection of his own psyche, it also creates something similar for Eddie. Instead of a woman, it is a man, and instead of a lover, he is very much a hater. Eddie is pursued throughout the nightmare by this man. This is an incarnation of one of Eddie's bullies, one of his tormentors out in the real world. In Silent Hill, this man follows him deeper and deeper into the town's other world, mocking him, insulting him, humiliating him relentlessly, imitating the real-life persecution that Eddie feels. And eventually, Eddie cannot take it anymore. He kills this man. In the same way that the town fulfills James' wish to reunite with his late wife in a twisted way via Maria, it fulfills Eddie's wish to take revenge on his tormentor, to have power over him via this man. But then the bully just comes back. Just like it does with Maria, Silent Hill keeps creating new versions of this guy, no matter how many are killed, and their mockery of Eddie becomes more twisted and more relentless until he finally breaks. But let's rewind back to the start of Eddie's story. In his very first scene, James finds Eddie puking his guts out in this disgusting, crummy bathroom. Eddie is meant to look pathetic and weak here. This is a humiliating position to be in, and that is furthered by his weight too. Eddie is fat. He is very fat. I mean, I'm fat bred, and I'm not even as fat as this guy. A lot of times in fiction, overweight characters are portrayed to be ridiculous and silly, unattractive, not to be taken seriously. I'm not saying that is a fair portrayal, but it is a common portrayal in fiction. He immediately begins making excuses for himself, pleading innocence before he even gets accused of anything. He doesn't even seem to know what he's claiming to be innocent of at first. He just says, "I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. It wasn't me." Recognizing how helpless this kid is, James tells him to depart the town, to run away to safety, and then leaves the kid behind in this bathroom, even after Eddie asks James to come with him. In a very subtle way, James is, unintentionally, treating Eddie the same way his bullies do, not taking him seriously, talking down to him. This creates a budding resentment which will eventually blossom into deadly violence. In his next appearance, we find Eddie speaking with Laura. She actually gives him some decent, if naive, advice. He reveals to her that the police are after him, and she tells him that, instead of running away, he should just go back wherever he came from and apologize. Of course, an apology will definitely not solve all of his problems, but she is right that his only chance of salvation is to stop running away and face his problems head on. Unfortunately for him, he never heeds her advice. This scene plays out slightly differently in the two different versions of the game. In the remake, it takes place in a movie theater, and Eddie is stuffing his face with a bucket full of sticky strawberry sauce. In the original, it takes place in a bowling alley, and Eddie is eating an inexplicably fresh pizza, which leads to one of my all-time favorite lines in any horror game.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
She said she was fine by herself.
On the one hand, this scene is hilarious. This is one of the most frightening and bizarre horror games ever made, and here is this dude just casually stuffing his fat face full of pizza while the world around him descends into madness. But on the other hand, I empathize with Eddie so very strongly here. I know this might sound silly, but this really is kind of like just looking at a reflection of myself. This is stress eating. This is a guy who feels terrible about himself, who's having an awful, terrible, very bad day, and so in order to comfort himself, he is eating and eating and eating because it's the only thing that can make him feel better. This is what depression looks like. This is what giving up looks like. I know because I've done it. And once again, Eddie is being portrayed as silly, ridiculous, pathetic, and basically harmless. He's just a big, fat, lazy loser doing exactly what big, fat, lazy losers do. The remake has added an additional line though. James throws an empty pizza box aside and says, "I see you've gotten your appetite back." And then watch Eddie's reaction. The clear resentment, the embarrassment, the anger he feels towards James is growing, becoming uglier, and James does not even realize what he's doing. In his next scene, Eddie's behavior begins to change, becomes far more unsettling. Okay, so James drops down into the prison. This is the point in the game where reality itself begins to break down, to no longer make sense. When the town of Silent Hill begins to feel less like a real town and more like a twisted nightmare. The story is getting darker and darker too. Maria has been killed, James has failed to protect her, failed to reach Laura, failed to find his wife. Things are becoming more and more hopeless. And then here is Eddie, sitting in the darkness alone beside a dead body, holding a revolver and reciting a bizarre monologue about how easy it is to kill someone, about how quickly a life can be destroyed. At this point, Eddie has discovered that he does have an alternative to running. Instead, he can choose violence. He has come to the stunned realization that he can just kill all of the people who torment him. With this realization, his character has begun a sudden and dramatic slide into darkness. However, he has not yet fully embraced this choice. He plays off this monologue like it was just a big joke, like he's the same ridiculous, pathetic fat guy he was before, but we've seen the darkness in him. We will watch his final scene together, and this time, as we watch, I want to ask you a different question. How does Eddie's behavior here mirror James' own choices? In what way are these two characters actually very similar? Okay, here it is.
Couldn't leave well enough alone, huh? You just had to follow me all the way out here. How many times do I have to kill you?
Eddie. Whoa, Eddie. It's me.
Oh. Hi, James.
Eddie, what are you doing?
Well, what's it look like I'm doing? You fat, disgusting piece of shit, you make me sick. You gonna cry, fat ass? You gonna run to your mama? Waste of skin, why don't you just kill yourself? Oh. Maybe he was right. Maybe I am nothing but a fat, disgusting piece of shit. But you know what? It doesn't matter if you're smart, dumb, ugly, pretty. It's all the same once you're dead. And a corpse can't laugh.
Eddie.
What's that? You want to talk down to me some more? Tell me to relax? You're just like the rest of them, James.
No, I don't want...
Shut up! You think I'm stupid. You think I don't see it. But you've been laughing at me all along. Ever since we first met. But you ain't laughing now, are you?
You need help, Eddie.
Don't get all holy on me, James. This town called you too. You and me are the same. We're not like other people, don't you know that? Well, you're about to find out.
The big obvious truth in Eddie's story is the relentless and vicious bullying he has experienced, and also the way he has internalized that bullying. He speaks about himself with the same language his bullies use. He has begun to believe these things about himself. Maybe I am a fat, disgusting piece of shit. He has given up. He will never try to be anything more than the caricature his bullies make him out to be. Eddie is someone who has been portrayed as weak and powerless throughout this story. But now he has finally found a way to make himself feel powerful. He has discovered nihilism. He has discovered violence. If he can kill his bullies, then he is the one with all the power. This choice reflects James' own decision to murder his wife. He took control of his own miserable situation in the exact same way, by simply killing the problem. In this scene, Eddie becomes a reflection of James' worst self. For a little while, Eddie is in total control of this scene. Notice the way he interrupts all of James' lines, the way he dominates the conversation, but it does not last. Eventually, James pushes back, reasserts control. That is what the punch to the face is, and once again, Eddie is left in an embarrassing position, lying on his back on the ground, overpowered by another man. But this time, he refuses to accept it. He desperately fights to cling to this newfound power. The subtler second truth in Eddie's story is the way his bullying has twisted his personality, turned him paranoid, depressed, and full of hate. Again, this clearly mirrors the exact same transformation James underwent during those 3 years of his wife's illness. From loving husband into murderous monster. This boss battle, like so many other boss battles I have discussed in other games on this channel, is really a confrontation between the protagonist and the worst version of himself. Usually, when a protagonist defeats a dark reflection like this, it is meant to be a demonstration of some sort of character growth, of strength, but not this time. James feels terrible for having killed another human being, for having once again failed. This is one of James' darkest moments. On this channel, I have often discussed the genre of cosmic horror, and the unique way that cosmic horror stories tend to twist the search for the truth. In most stories, the search for the truth is depicted as noble, honorable, and a morally good one. Scientists and investigators and detectives doing what is right because the truth is right. But in cosmic horror, the search for the truth often leads characters to discover hideous, terrible things about the nature of reality, or the nature of the universe, or the nature of humanity's place in that universe. These revelations break their minds, cause them to go insane. Now, I do not think Silent Hill 2 can be labeled as cosmic horror, but its depiction of the theme of truth is very similar. However, instead of it being big, grand, huge truths about the nature of the universe that destroy these characters, it is small, intimate truths. James being unable to deal with the way his relationship with his wife collapsed. Angela being unable to accept that her own mother did not love or protect her. These small, intimate truths end up being just as destructive as the big, huge ones. Angela chooses self-destruction, Eddie chooses violence, and depending on the ending, James chooses to drive his car into the lake. In this way, the story of Silent Hill 2 demonstrates the fraught nature of the truth. How it is not the monsters who will destroy us, but ourselves. Those inconvenient truths about ourselves that we would rather just ignore. Those inner demons whose voices we refuse to acknowledge.